The metal rim felt cold beneath Harper Mitchell's fingertips as she traced the wheel of her chair. Counting rotations like a prayer she'd whispered every morning for 14 months. 23 turns from her locker to first period. The same count that once measured her steps in cheerleading routines, back when her legs could carry dreams instead of just dead weight. But today, something was different. Today, the counting wasn't about managing anxiety or marking time until she could escape home. Today, Harper Mitchell was measuring the distance to war. She sat perfectly still in the hallway of Westfield High School, watching Bryce Wellington hold court near the trophy case like some kind of teenage king. 220 pounds of muscle and malice. The state wrestling champion commanded attention simply by existing. His Letterman jacket stretched across shoulders that had pinned opponents to mats from Denver to Colorado Springs. And his laugh, that particular sound that made Harper's stomach clench, echoed off the marble walls that his father's construction company had installed. The Wellington family name was etched in gold on half the plaques in this school. Donor recognition for the new science wing. The upgraded gymnasium where Bryce practiced his holds. Even the accessible ramps that Harper now used. Bitter irony that her tormentor's family had paid for the very accommodations that marked her as different. "Check this out," Bryce's voice carried across the hallway as he held up his phone. "It's got over 1,500 views now." Harper didn't need to see the screen to know what video he was showing. She'd memorized every cruel second of it. Her. Struggling to reach her backpack after Bryce had accidentally knocked it off her chair. The caption read, "Watching disabled girl pretend to be normal." 423 likes. 67 shares. Comments that ranged from laughing emojis to suggestions she should just stay home where she belongs. If you're feeling that rush of what's going to happen next, hit that like button. It really helps more people discover these stories. And if you want to share where you're watching from, drop it in the comments below. For those who want to support more stories like this one, there's a thanks button right under this video. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps me bring you more inspiring tales of courage and standing up for what's right. Thank you for being here. Now, let's see what happens when push comes to shove. The worst part wasn't the video itself. It was that Harper had gotten used to it. In the 14 months since the accident, she'd developed a twisted kind of expertise in cataloging humiliation. The day Bryce started a betting pool on when she'd drop out. The memes featuring her face photoshopped onto broken dolls. The whispered conversations about how tragic it was, how she used to be so pretty, so perfect, so normal. Normal. As if she'd ever been normal, even before the accident. As if anyone really was. Miss Mitchell. Harper looked up to find Mrs. Santos, the school counselor, approaching with that particular expression adults wore when they wanted to help, but didn't know how. Pity wrapped in professional concern. "Could I speak with you for a moment? If you're feeling that rush of what's going to happen next, hit that like button. It really helps more people discover these stories. And if you want to share where you're watching from, drop it in the comments below. For those who want to support more stories like this one, there's a thanks button right under this video. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps me bring you more inspiring tales of courage and standing up for what's right. Thank you for being here. Now, let's see what happens when push comes to shove." Harper nodded and followed Mrs. Santos down the hall, past the cluster of students still gathered around Bryce. She felt their eyes on her as she rolled by, and heard the barely suppressed snickers. One of them, Bryce's girlfriend Madison, actually pulled out her phone. "Are you filming me?" Harper asked, stopping her chair abruptly. Madison startled, nearly dropping the device. "I was just… I mean, I wasn't…" She was just checking her messages. Bryce stepped forward, his tone carrying the easy confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences. "Relax, Harper. Not everything is about you." The casual cruelty in his voice hit like a physical blow. "Not everything is about you." As if she were the one seeking attention. As if she'd chosen to become the school's designated victim. "Of course not," Harper said quietly. "But your betting pool is." Bryce's smile faltered for just a moment, long enough for Harper to see she'd hit a nerve. Good. Let him feel uncomfortable for once. Mrs. Santos cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in my office." But Harper wasn't finished. She'd been storing up words for months, letting them ferment in silence until they'd become something sharper. "Tell me, Bryce, what are the current odds? Am I supposed to drop out this week or next?" "Harper," Mrs. Santos warned. "It's okay," Bryce said, his smile returning. "Harper's just having one of her episodes. It's hard for her. You know, going from being, well, what she used to be, to this." He gestured vaguely at her wheelchair. The hallway had gone quiet. Other students sensed drama and gathered like vultures, phones emerging from pockets with practiced stealth. Harper could almost see the social media posts writing themselves, "Disabled girl melts down in hallway." But Harper didn't melt down. Instead, she did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh or a hysterical one. It was genuine amusement. The kind that comes from finally understanding a joke you'd been missing. "You know what's funny? Bryce, you think this wheelchair makes me less than what I was. But you have no idea what I am now." Something in her tone made him step back. For just a second, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. Harper smiled. Not the practiced cheerleader smile she'd perfected years ago, but something newer and more dangerous. "I guess you'll find out." She turned her chair and rolled toward Mrs. Santos's office, leaving Bryce and his audience in confused silence. But as she moved, Harper's fingertips found the wheel rim again. And this time, she wasn't counting distance or managing anxiety. She was calculating force and trajectory, momentum and leverage. The mathematics of combat that Miss Rodriguez had been teaching her in secret for the past 6 months. In Mrs. Santos's office, Harper sat across from the counselor's desk while morning light filtered through windows that offered a clear view of the student parking lot. She could see Bryce's lifted truck, another gift from Daddy Wellington, parked across 2 spaces like a monument to entitlement. "Harper, I'm worried about you," Mrs. Santos began. "There have been reports about the video, about several incidents. Students have mentioned that you seem more isolated lately, less engaged in class. And now this confrontation in the hallway." Harper almost laughed again. Less engaged. As if withdrawing from a social ecosystem designed to exclude her was some kind of mental health crisis. "Mrs. Santos, do you know how Allison Martinez is doing?" The counselor blinked at the apparent subject change. "Allison, she transferred to Roosevelt High last semester. Why do you ask? What about Sarah Kim?" "Sarah moved back to California with her family." "Harper, what does this have to do with Jennifer Walsh, Madison Foster? They all left within the past 2 years, didn't they?" Mrs. Santos's expression grew cautious. "Students transfer for many reasons: family situations, academic opportunities, or because Bryce Wellington made their lives hell." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Mrs. Santos set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. Harper, these are serious allegations. If you have specific information about bullying or harassment, I have videos, Harper said quietly. Audio recordings, screenshots of group chats, financial records showing payments from Wellington Construction to several school board members. Bank statements proving that Jim Wellington's company donated money for the new gymnasium right after Bryce's first assault charge was mysteriously dropped. Mrs. Santos went very still. How did you obtain financial records? Harper smiled that new, dangerous smile again. My brother Marcus studies cybersecurity at MIT. He's been very helpful with research. The truth was more complicated than that. Marcus had taught Harper about digital forensics as a way to keep her mind occupied during recovery. What started as therapeutic distraction had evolved into something more purposeful when Harper realized that information was power, and power was the only thing Bryce Wellington understood. Harper, if you're suggesting some kind of conspiracy, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you that Bryce Wellington is a predator who uses his family's influence to escape consequences. And I'm not going to be another girl who disappears quietly. Mrs. Santos reached for her phone. I think we should call your mother. My mother is at work. She's pulling double shifts to pay for my medical expenses and adaptive equipment that insurance won't cover. She doesn't need to take time off to deal with problems the school should have handled months ago. Harper's voice remained steady, but Mrs. Santos could hear the steel beneath the surface. This wasn't the broken girl who'd returned to school after the accident. This was someone else entirely. What do you want, Harper? I want you to do your job. I want Bryce held accountable, and I want to finish my education without being treated like entertainment. Mrs. Santos was quiet for a long moment. These are serious allegations. They would require investigation, documentation. I have documentation, and the cooperation of other students who might be reluctant to come forward. Harper reached into her backpack and pulled out a tablet. Victoria Ashford wants to speak with you. The counselor's eyebrows shot up. Victoria Ashford was Westfield royalty, student body president, National Merit Scholar, and the closest thing the school had to a celebrity. She was also Bryce Wellington's ex-girlfriend. Victoria has agreed to testify about what she witnessed during their relationship. In exchange, she wants protection from retaliation. Mrs. Santos stared at the tablet as if it contained state secrets. How long have you been planning this? Planning implies I had a choice, Harper said. I've been surviving. There's a difference. The bell rang, signaling the end of first period. Through the window, Harper could see students streaming across the courtyard toward their next classes. Among them, Bryce Wellington walked with his usual swagger, surrounded by his usual crowd. He had no idea that his world was about to change. But Harper did. She had been preparing for this moment for months, building her case piece by piece, while everyone assumed she was just another broken victim learning to cope. They saw the wheelchair and made assumptions about weakness, vulnerability, helplessness. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I need to get to chemistry, Harper said, tucking the tablet back into her bag. Harper, wait. If what you're telling me is true, this could get very complicated very quickly. The Wellington family has significant influence in this community. Harper paused at the door. Mrs. Santos, do you know what I've learned in the past 14 months? The counselor shook her head. Power isn't about what you can do. It's about what people think you can do. The Wellingtons have built their power on the assumption that no one will challenge them. that everyone will stay quiet and accept their place. Harper's fingers found the wheel rim of her chair again, but this time the gesture felt different. Not anxious or defensive, but purposeful, like a gunslinger checking her weapon. I'm not everyone. The chemistry lab was Harper's favorite classroom, not because she particularly loved science, but because it was the one place where her wheelchair gave her an advantage. While other students had to stand at lab benches, Harper could roll right up to the equipment and work at a comfortable height. Dr. Peterson had even modified some of the apparatus to be more accessible, creating adaptations that ended up being useful for everyone. The PE teacher had been covering for Dr. Peterson during a faculty meeting when Harper first returned to school after the accident. Most teachers had treated Harper like she was made of glass, speaking too loudly, offering help she didn't need, avoiding eye contact. But Miss Rodriguez had simply nodded when Harper entered and pointed to an empty station. "You're Harper Mitchell," she'd said, not a question. "Yes, ma'am. I saw your routines on YouTube. State championship, sophomore year. That back handspring to full twist sequence was flawless." Harper had been stunned into silence. No one talked about her cheerleading anymore. It was like her athletic past had been erased along with the use of her legs. "I was wondering," Miss Rodriguez had continued, organizing chemical samples with the same precision Harper had once used to arrange pom-poms, "if you'd ever considered adaptive sports." Adaptive sports, Paralympic competition, wheelchair racing, basketball, tennis. There's a whole world of athletic achievement that most people never see. Maria Rodriguez, Paralympic gold medalist in judo. London 2012, silver medal. Rio 2016, retired from competition due to a training injury that left her with limited mobility in her left arm. Current occupation PE teacher and adaptive sports coordinator. Miss Rodriguez wasn't just offering sympathy, she was offering possibility. The next week, Harper had stayed after school to ask questions. What started as curiosity evolved into private training sessions in the old wrestling room. Miss Rodriguez taught Harper that her wheelchair wasn't just a medical device, it was a tool, a weapon, an extension of her body that could be used for defense, offense, and everything in between. People see the chair and think limitation, Miss Rodriguez had explained during one of their early sessions. But limitation is a mindset. Physics is reality. And physics says that wheels create momentum. Momentum creates force, and force, properly applied, can overcome almost any obstacle. Harper had been skeptical at first. How could someone in a wheelchair defend herself against someone like Bryce Wellington? Then, Miss Rodriguez had shown her the videos. Paralympic judo competitions where athletes with various disabilities faced off against opponents who seemed to have every advantage. Wheelchair basketball games that moved faster and hit harder than their able-bodied counterparts. Racing competitions where precision and strategy mattered more than raw power. Adaptation isn't about overcoming disability, Miss Rodriguez had said. It's about maximizing different abilities. Your center of gravity is lower now. Your upper body strength has increased dramatically. Your core stability is better than most athletes. The question isn't whether you can compete, it's whether you're willing to train. Harper had been willing for 6 months. She'd met Miss Rodriguez 3 times a week in secret. They worked on everything from basic self-defense to advanced combat techniques adapted for wheelchair users. Harper learned to use her chair's momentum for striking, its frame for leverage, its wheels for mobility and intimidation. She studied the biomechanics of force distribution, the psychology of confrontation, the legal boundaries of self-defense. But more than anything, she learned to see herself differently. The Harper who'd returned to school after the accident had been broken, diminished, apologetic for taking up space. The Harper who sat in chemistry class now was something else entirely. Someone who understood that her greatest weapon wasn't her wheelchair or her newly developed fighting skills. It was the fact that no one expected her to fight back. "Miss Mitchell, could you help distribute these lab sheets?" Dr. Peterson's request brought Harper back to the present. She nodded and began rolling between lab stations, handing out instruction packets for the day's experiment. As she moved, she became aware of whispered conversations following in her wake. "Did you see what happened in the hallway?" She totally went off on Bryce. "My mom knows her mom. Apparently she's been having problems since the accident. I heard she's on medication now." Harper kept her expression neutral, but internally she catalogued each comment. Let them think she was unstable. Let them underestimate her. In a few hours, their assumptions would become her advantage. At the station where Madison Foster, Bryce's girlfriend, sat with two other cheerleaders, Harper paused to set down their lab sheet. Madison looked up with calculated sympathy. "Harper, I just want you to know that I think what Bryce did with that video was really awful," she said in a voice loud enough for nearby students to hear. "I told him it wasn't funny." Harper studied Madison's face, the perfect makeup, the expensive highlights, the practiced expression of concern. Madison Foster had been her replacement on the cheerleading squad. She'd slipped seamlessly into Harper's former life, dating Harper's former boyfriend's best friend, occupying Harper's former social circle. "That's interesting," Harper said quietly, "because according to the metadata on the video file, it was uploaded from your phone." Madison's face went pale beneath her foundation. What?" "The digital signature embedded in the video file shows it was recorded and uploaded from a device registered to Madison. Foster.2007@gmail.com. My brother taught me how to trace these things." The other cheerleaders exchanged glances. They'd been there when Madison filmed Harper struggling to reach her backpack, and they'd laughed along with everyone else. But being complicit in cruelty was different from being exposed for it. "Harper, I think there's been some kind of mistake." "No mistake," Harper said, still speaking quietly. "Just documentation, the same kind I have for everyone who's been participating in this harassment." She moved on to the next table, leaving Madison staring after her with something that might have been fear. The truth was, Harper had been documenting everything for months. Every video, every social media post, every cruel comment had been screenshot, downloaded, and stored in encrypted files that Marcus had helped her create. She had a digital paper trail that would make prosecutors weep with joy, if it ever came to that. But Harper wasn't planning to take this to court. She was planning something more immediate and more personal. She'd been mixing her own compounds for months. Information, training, opportunity, and motivation. All she needed now was the right catalyst to trigger a reaction that would change everything. "Sorry I'm late, Dr. Peterson," he said with the casual confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for anything. "Coach needed to see me about tomorrow's match." Dr. Peterson nodded and gestured toward the only empty station, the one directly across from Harper's lab bench. Bryce noticed Harper as he sat down, and his smile took on that predatory quality she'd come to know so well. "Hey there, Harper. Still causing drama this morning." "I heard." Harper looked up from her chemical samples and met his gaze directly. "Just conducting experiments, Bryce. Seeing what happens when you apply pressure to unstable compounds." Something in her tone made him pause. For a moment, his confident mask slipped, and she saw something else underneath. Not just cruelty, but uncertainty, maybe even fear. What's that supposed to mean? Harper smiled and returned to her work without answering. Let him wonder. Let him spend the rest of the day trying to figure out what she was planning. Because in exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes, when school ended and the parking lot filled with students heading home, Harper Mitchell was going to show Bryce Wellington exactly what happened when you pushed the wrong person too far. The chemical reaction was about to begin. And this time, Harper was going to be the catalyst. Harper, what do you think is the difference between revenge and justice? Harper had paused in her practice routine. Revenge is personal. Justice is fair. Close, Miss Rodriguez had said. But I think the real difference is this: revenge is about making someone pay for what they did to you. Justice is about preventing them from doing it to someone else. At the time, Harper had filed the conversation away as one of Miss Rodriguez's philosophical moments. Now, watching Bryce across the lab bench, she understood what her teacher had been trying to tell her. This wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. As Bryce passed her station on his way out, he leaned down and spoke quietly enough that only she could hear. I don't know what you think you're planning, Mitchell, but you should be very careful. My family has lawyers who eat little girls like you for breakfast. Harper looked up at him with that same dangerous smile. That's funny, Bryce, because my family has evidence that could put your family out of business by dinner. For just a moment, his mask slipped completely. She saw real fear flash across his features before the cocky smile returned. You're bluffing. Am I? Harper reached into her backpack and pulled out a single sheet of paper, a bank statement showing a transfer of $50,000 from Wellington Construction to a company called Educational Excellence Consulting, which happened to be owned by the wife of the school board president. Bryce's face went white as he scanned the document. That's just page 1, Harper said softly. I have 47 more just like it, along with audio recordings, video evidence, and testimony from 6 different students who were too scared to speak up before. She tucked the paper back into her bag and looked up at him with innocent eyes. But you're right about one thing. Your family does have lawyers. The question is, how long do you think it'll take them to throw you under the bus when the FBI starts asking questions about corruption and witness intimidation? Bryce opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time since Harper had known him, the school's most feared bully looked genuinely terrified. See you after school, Bryce, Harper said pleasantly. I think we need to finish our conversation. As she rolled out of the classroom, Harper felt something she hadn't experienced in 14 months: power. Not the artificial power of popularity or status, but the real power that came from refusing to be a victim. The final bell was still hours away, but Harper Mitchell was already ready for war. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Westfield High parking lot as Harper positioned her wheelchair near the main entrance. She'd chosen this spot carefully, visible from multiple angles, with security cameras capturing every moment, but far enough from the building that faculty wouldn't immediately intervene. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. FBI contact confirmed. Agent Chen will be monitoring from federal building. Evidence package uploaded to secure server. You sure about this? Harper typed back. Never been more sure of anything. She wasn't lying. For 14 months, she'd felt like she was drowning in other people's expectations of who she should be, the grateful victim, the inspiring overcomer, the quiet girl who accepted her new limitations with grace. Today, she was going to show them who she really was. Students began streaming out of the building, their voices creating a familiar symphony of teenage chatter. Harper watched them move in their predictable patterns, the athletes heading toward practice, the theater kids clustering near the arts wing, the popular crowd gravitating toward the senior parking lot where the most expensive cars waited. And there, emerging from the main entrance like some kind of conquering hero, was Bryce Wellington. He walked with Mason Reynolds and two other wrestlers, their conversation punctuated by the kind of loud laughter that demanded attention. Harper could see Bryce scanning the crowd, looking for her. When their eyes met across the courtyard, he said something to his friends and began walking in her direction. This was it. Harper's fingers found the brake release on her wheelchair, a modification Miss Rodriguez had suggested during their training. Most people didn't realize that wheelchairs could be weapons, that momentum and physics could turn assistive technology into something far more powerful. "Well, well," Bryce called out as he approached, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "Look who decided to wait around for a chat." A crowd was already forming. High school students had an instinct for drama, and word had spread throughout the day about the confrontation in chemistry class. Phones appeared as if by magic, ready to capture whatever happened next. Harper remained perfectly still as Bryce stopped about 10 feet away, his friends flanking him like bodyguards. She could see Victoria Ashford in her peripheral vision, standing near the student council bulletin board, with her own phone ready. "You know, Harper," Bryce continued, his voice loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "I've been thinking about our conversation earlier, about evidence and lawyers and all that." He stepped closer, and Harper could see the calculation in his eyes. He was playing to the audience, performing the role of the reasonable victim being harassed by the unstable girl in the wheelchair. "I think maybe the stress of your situation is getting to you, making you paranoid. You know, seeing conspiracies where there aren't any." Harper tilted her head slightly. "Is that your professional opinion, Dr. Wellington?" A few students snickered, but Bryce's smile never wavered. "I'm just saying, maybe it's time for you to accept reality. Some people are leaders, and some people are followers. Some people matter, and some people," he gestured vaguely at her wheelchair, "well, some people just take up space." The crowd had grown to about 30 students now, forming a loose circle around them. Harper could feel their attention like a physical weight, could see some of them already typing on their phones, updating social media in real time. "Perfect." "You're right about one thing, Bryce," Harper said, her voice carrying clearly across the parking lot. "Some people are leaders, but you're not one of them. You're just a coward with daddy's money and a system that protects you." Bryce's smile faltered. "Excuse me." Harper reached into her backpack and pulled out her tablet, balancing it on her lap. "Should we tell everyone about Allison Martinez? About how you cornered her in the equipment room and told her she'd better transfer schools, or you'd make sure she regretted it?" The crowd shifted restlessly. A few students exchanged glances. They remembered Allison's sudden departure mid-semester. "Or maybe we should discuss Sarah Kim," Harper continued, the anonymous emails calling her family foreign trash, the dead fish in her locker, the bomb threat called in with her voice, which was pretty impressive voice modulation software. "By the way, your dad's company has some interesting IT contractors." Bryce's face was reddening, but he kept his voice level. "You're making things up." "Am I?" Harper swiped across her tablet screen. "Because I have the email metadata, the purchase receipts for the voice software, bank records showing payments to the students who helped you." She looked up at the crowd, many of whom were now recording openly. Did you know that Bryce's family has paid over $200,000 in the past 3 years to cover up his behavior? Settlements, legal fees, donations to the school board members who vote on disciplinary actions. "That's enough," Bryce snarled, stepping closer. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know that Jennifer Walsh's family received $50,000 to sign a non-disclosure agreement after you assaulted her at homecoming. I know that Madison Foster over there," Harper gestured toward Bryce's girlfriend, who was standing frozen near the edge of the crowd, "has been documenting your targets for months, including photos of me struggling to reach things after you knocked them down." Madison's face went pale, and several students turned to stare at her. "I know that your father's construction company has been overcharging the school district by 30% and kicking back the extra money to administrators who protect you. And I know that you've been planning to do to me what you did to all those other girls, make me disappear." The crowd was completely silent now, transfixed by the revelation. Harper could see several students filming, their faces reflecting a mixture of shock and fascination. Bryce looked around at the watching faces, and Harper could see the moment he realized he'd lost control of the narrative. His mask of reasonable concern cracked, revealing the rage underneath. "You think you're so smart," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "But you're forgetting something important. I don't care what evidence you think you have. I don't care who you think will protect you. At the end of the day, you're still just a crippled freak who needs to learn her place." He lunged forward and grabbed the handles of Harper's wheelchair, yanking hard. The sudden movement sent her tablet flying, and for a moment she felt the familiar panic of being helpless, dependent on someone else's mercy. But only for a moment, because Harper Mitchell wasn't the same broken girl who'd returned to school 14 months ago. She was someone who'd spent 6 months learning that her wheelchair wasn't a limitation, it was a weapon. As Bryce leaned over her, trying to tip her chair backward, Harper released the brake and used his own momentum against him. She spun the chair in a tight circle, using the footrests to sweep his legs out from under him. As he stumbled, she grabbed his wrist with her left hand and used her right to strike upward with the palm of her hand, a move Miss Rodriguez had drilled into her hundreds of times. The blow caught Bryce under the chin with perfect precision, snapping his head back and sending him staggering. But Harper wasn't finished. She spun her chair again, building momentum, and as Bryce tried to regain his balance, she extended her right leg and delivered a devastating kick directly to his solar plexus. The impact sent him flying backward, his feet leaving the ground before he crashed into the side of a parked car with a sickening thud. The parking lot erupted in chaos. Students screamed, phones captured every angle, and Bryce Wellington, the most feared bully in school, lay crumpled on the asphalt, gasping for breath. Harper sat perfectly still in her wheelchair, her hands folded calmly in her lap, as if nothing had happened. "That," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the sudden silence, "is what happens when you underestimate someone." Security guards came running from the building, followed by several teachers and Principal Wells. The crowd of students backed away but didn't disperse. They were too riveted by what they'd witnessed. "What happened here?" Principal Wells demanded, looking between Harper's calm expression and Bryce's prone form. "Self-defense," said a voice from the crowd. Victoria Ashford stepped forward, her phone still recording. Bryce Wellington physically assaulted a disabled student. She defended herself. A chorus of agreement rose from the watching students. Even Mason Reynolds, Bryce's loyal friend, was nodding reluctantly. "Is that true?" Principal Wells asked Harper. Harper nodded toward the security cameras mounted on nearby light poles. I'm sure the footage will show exactly what happened. Bryce grabbed my wheelchair without permission and tried to tip me over. I defended myself using techniques I learned in adaptive martial arts training. As the paramedics arrived to check on Bryce, who was now sitting up but still dazed, Harper retrieved her tablet from where it had fallen. The screen was cracked, but still functional. "Principal Wells," she said, "I think it's time we had a longer conversation about what's been happening at this school." An hour later, Harper sat in Principal Wells's office alongside Mrs. Santos, Miss Rodriguez, and Agent Rebecca Chen from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. Victoria Ashford was there too, her testimony having proved crucial in establishing the pattern of harassment and cover-ups. "The evidence is extensive," Agent Chen was saying as she reviewed Harper's digital files. "Financial fraud, witness intimidation, corruption of public officials. This goes far beyond school bullying." Principal Wells looked stunned. "I had no idea the scope was this extensive." "That was the point," Harper said. "The Wellington family has been very careful to keep individual incidents small and separate. But when you put them all together, we estimate they've spent over $500,000 in the past 5 years covering up Bryce's behavior and buying protection from school officials." Agent Chen continued, "That's federal money being misused, which makes this our jurisdiction." "What happens now?" Miss Rodriguez asked. "Criminal investigation, obviously, but also civil rights violations. This represents a pattern of denying equal access to education based on disability and other protected characteristics." Now, watching adults finally take action, she realized something important she'd never been fighting just for herself. She'd been fighting for Allison and Sarah and Jennifer and all the other students who'd been forced to suffer in silence. "There's something else," Victoria said quietly. "Bryce isn't the only student who's been protected this way. There are at least 3 other families who've used similar tactics." Agent Chen made a note. "We'll need those names." As the meeting concluded, Harper found herself alone with Miss Rodriguez in the hallway outside the principal's office. "I'm proud of you," her teacher said simply, "not for the fighting, though your technique was flawless, but for having the courage to stand up when it mattered." Harper smiled, and for the first time in months, it felt completely natural. "You taught me that my wheelchair didn't make me weak, but I had to learn for myself that it didn't make me a victim either." Miss Rodriguez nodded. "What will you do now?" Harper looked out the window toward the parking lot, where news vans were already gathering. The story would be everywhere by tomorrow. Disabled girl takes down school bully. Exposes corruption scandal. She'd become famous whether she wanted to or not. "I think," Harper said slowly, "I'm going to make sure this never happens to anyone else." 6 months later, Harper Mitchell stood at a podium in the Colorado State Capitol, addressing a joint session of the legislature about anti-bullying legislation and school accountability measures. The Harper Mitchell Act, requiring mandatory reporting of harassment incidents and independent oversight of school disciplinary procedures, had passed unanimously in both chambers. Bryce Wellington was serving time in juvenile detention while his father faced federal charges for corruption and tax evasion. 3 school board members had resigned, and Principal Wells had implemented sweeping reforms at Westfield High. But perhaps most importantly, Harper had started a foundation providing legal and emotional support for students facing harassment and discrimination. Her story had inspired dozens of other victims to come forward, creating a movement that was changing schools across the country. The girl who'd once counted wheelchair rotations to manage anxiety was now counting victories instead. And she was just getting started. The metal rim of her wheelchair felt warm under her fingertips now. No longer a symbol of limitation, but a reminder of the strength she'd found in accepting who she really was. Harper Mitchell wasn't broken. She wasn't inspiring. She wasn't a victim or a hero. She was simply someone who'd refused to disappear quietly. And sometimes, that was enough to change the world.